All right, John, I am just so thrilled to have you on the show. So let's just start by if, let's say, someone's just living under a rock and has not yet heard your story. Let's start there. If you wouldn't care to just share with our listeners a little bit about your testimony.
So first, Rebecca, thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to be on your show, to visit with your friends. For the many who live under a rock, I recognize that a lot of folks don't know the name John O'Leary and have not heard the story before. I'm incredibly familiar with that fact. What they have not heard then is that at age 9, I was involved in a gasoline explosion in my garage. It split a can of gasoline in half, Rebecca. It launched me 20 feet against the far side of the garage. It set my world on fire, literally and figuratively. When we are little, we're all taught and trained to stop, drop, and roll when we find ourselves on
Right.
fire. But when you're the one there, it is the last thing in the world you do. You run, and that's certainly what I did. I ran for my life, ran back into my mom and dad's house, and I seldom share the story, but I will with you. The on fire, flames leaping 3 feet off of me in all directions. I'm on the front hall, on top of a rug, begging for a hero, praying for a savior. And my brother Jim comes up from the basement. That's where he slept. And he sees me and I see him. And I remember thinking, oh God, anybody else, not him. He's not able to save my life. That brother, he's a jerk. He's self-centered. He can't do it. And yet, Rebecca, and I hope you know this, and I know your listeners are growing in this, but here's the truth. God can use anybody.
That's right.
Anybody. And this was his opportunity to use a 17-year-old freckle-faced, acne-riddled boy who had never done anything kind for his siblings before this day for a cause. And my brother Jim picked up the rug. He ran over to me, beats down the flames. It took him a couple minutes. Then he carries me outside, jumps on top of me. We roll around together. 1987, the lifesaver of the year for the state of Missouri was a 17-year-old boy named Jim O'Leary, who changed. He allowed God to use him and work through him. Jim remains my hero even 33 years later. But that is the beginning point of a story that will take 5 months in the hospital and years of surgery and therapy.
Yeah. Wow. That is so awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about just the time from, that moment into your full recovery? Can you walk us through a little bit of that journey?
So I will, and I'll leave some gaping holes. And if you want to ignore them, great. If you want to come back and fill them up a little.
Perfect. Okay, cool.
But, the story starts with the explosion and my brother Jim, and then the sisters in the front yard saving my life. It moves eventually through the work of paramedics and EMTs and firefighters to a hospital room. I remember at age 9, Rebecca, I'm laying in the hospital bed. I've got no clothes. They've all been burnt off. I've got no skin, literally 100% burned, crazy. And all I could think that morning was, oh my gosh, my dad is going to kill me when he finds out. My father's going to be irate. And I hear his voice down the hall. He's yelling at some nurse, where is my boy, John? And this nurse does me no favors. She brings him back into the room. I think she should have called security, but she brings him all the way back into this room. This veteran and business owner, kind of type A guy, walks into the room, marches over toward me, points down, and then he says words I'll never forget. He says, John, look at me when I'm talking to you. Look at me when I'm talking to you. So I look up at my dad. And then he goes, John, I have never been so proud of anybody in my entire life. And my little buddy today, this morning, I am proud to be your dad. And then my father goes, and this is language you will know from your walk in the word. It's right out of the prodigal son. He says, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Just kept saying, I love you. And I remember kind of shutting my eyes as a little boy thinking, oh my gosh, nobody told my dad what happened.
Yeah.
Like he must not know. Maybe I can get away with this thing. And yet my dad knew what happened and he knew what mattered. And I think there's a difference between the two sometimes. Yeah. We get so focused in life, in relationship, in work, even in our faith walk, on the stuff frequently that does not matter at all. At all. And yet when my dad's home caught fire and when his son was laying there with no skin, no clothes, no chance, he came face to face with the stuff that actually mattered. And he turned into it. He changed, and I caught. My dad left work that day, and when he came into that room, he recognized what actually matters. As you know, easy in life to lose sight of the things that matter. And sometimes tragedy has this wonderful way of actually drawing us into not only the difficult, but the important.
Yeah.
And on January 17, 1987, a 9-year-old boy dying came face to face with grace and his father's love. And it changed what happened that day. And I think it changed what happened over the following 5 months in hospital and years of recovery.
Sure. Sure. Now, so you were 9 when this happened. Now, walk me through, you know, how did the Lord put it on your heart that, there was something bigger in your story that was meant to be shared with others? Could you talk a little bit about that process?
It's ongoing. I think this
Yeah.
conversation with you and me today is proof that I haven't figured it out. Like, I got a long way to go as a
Yeah.
leader, as a servant, as a man of God, as a child of God, like royal blood, man, coursing through my veins.
Yeah.
And I forget it. I just forget it too often. It's so the answer to your question isn't something I can give you a cool date back in the hospital. It's not a moment when I was saved. It's somehow more insignificant and maybe more important than a whole lot of other things we could talk about. My mom and dad wrote a book about my story. And
Yeah.
Rebecca, we'd never talked about it as a family. My dad got Parkinson's disease. He came home from work. He was no longer able to earn. So he wrote a little story about what happened to his son 25 years earlier. It's called Overwhelming Odds. And I read this book and it changed my life. I was 26, 27 years old. I had never talked about what happened. I'd never told dear friends about what happened to me. I'd never owned in the mirror really what happened to me.
Yeah.
I covered up and I masked up and I pretended like I was someone I really wasn't. But this book allowed me to see that who I really was someone I should not run from anymore, that there was
Right.
beauty in the scars and there's redemption in the story. And I started sharing that story first to an audience of one, the guy
Yeah.
looking back at me in the mirror. I was asked by 3 Girl Scouts in 3rd grade if I would share with them.
Wow.
And so my first big speaking opportunity was not to some Fortune 100 organization. It's to 3 Girl
Yeah.
Scouts.
That's so cool.
I'm naturally an introvert. I'd never told anybody the story. So this is a true story. I got sick in the parking lot on the walk in, but I put a piece of gum in Rebecca and walked into that meeting, shared with those girls. And that's my first speech ever given to 3 Girl Scouts.
Wow.
It was
That's so cool.
13 years ago. And I have spoken to more than 2 million people live since in 50 states. At 18 countries because of God's ability to use something that I would not have chosen and using a disease process called Parkinson's disease to redeem it and using a story that we kept buried under a rock for a long time. And one by one, we begin to embrace, we begin to celebrate, and God begins to use.
Yeah. Wow. That's so awesome. And then you wrote the book On Fire. In what year? Remind me of the year that came out.
That came out in March of 2016.
Okay, awesome. You want to talk a little bit about just the process of writing a book for the first time and what that was like? I'm actually in the process of doing research for my first book right now. So I'd love to hear any wisdom that you have to share there.
Awesome. So I would plan on this being a labor of love. If a woman carries a child 10 months and an elephant 18 months, I think a book is about 8 years.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it takes a while to foster this baby all the way through to a moment when you can release it into life.
Yeah.
So my experience was it took me about 10 years to write it.
Wow.
And that doesn't mean every day I'm writing it, but it took me 10
Sure.
years to really understand what is this story? Why does it matter? Why should a reader pick it up? And I think when I first began writing to Rebecca, I wrote a book about me. And as I eventually released it to the community, I wrote a book that God uses ordinary people for extraordinary purposes for reasons we can't understand this out of eternity.
Right.
And when the publisher read that, they then came back with a book cover, and it's a picture of me on the front of the cover of On Fire.
Yeah.
And when I got that cover, I said, hey, did you read the book? Because it has nothing at all to do with me. And so together we came up with this title, On Fire. But there's no picture of me. It's a white background, kind of an explosion if you really look at it. But the letters are made of like smoky, mirror type lettering, so that if you look closely, you can actually see light bouncing off the letters. And if you look closely enough, you can see your own image in it. And the idea is that the reader can see themselves in this book, because I'm not the hero of On Fire. The story I shared with my brother is one of the stories, but it's one of many. And the story of my brother or my dad coming in, it's a powerful story, but it's just one of many. And there are some incredible examples of love and how God uses people. But ultimately, it's an invitation to be that for others, not to just get and see what you can get out of it and squeeze that limit. But it's ultimately to see how in your role professionally, in your faith walk, as a servant, in the community, at home, you can allow light to shine through you. And if you choose to allow it, what can happen through your life?
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome.
And just to put a little bow on it.
Yeah.
We didn't know what would come with that book. It sold a couple 100,000 copies in the U.S. It's been translated into 16 languages. This
Wow.
little book has traveled the world
Isn't
because,
that crazy to
yeah,
think, now your story is in the hands of people all over the world speaking all these different languages, but the truths, are so universal. That's so neat.
well, 2,800 years ago, he wrote the words, "There's nothing new under the sun."
Yeah.
And if that was true 2,800 years ago,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure today it remains true. There is
Yeah.
nothing new under the sun. And that can either bore us, and it can. It has a tendency to make our life kind of mundane, or it can light us up to realize that God's still speaking. God's still speaking. And he uses the least likely people like Rebecca and
Right.
John and every
Right.
single person listening to our voices today.
Yeah. Yeah. He does. He does. So I was looking at your Instagram and I saw where you're doing book cover little survey for book number 2 right now.
Which
I
one
was
did you
so
vote
excited.
for? Who'd you vote
Um,
for?
I need to go back and look. I'm gonna pull it up. But okay, I'm gonna pull it up while you talk and then I'll tell you which one I
Awesome.
chose. So tell me what you can tell me about book number 2.
So book number 2 is called In Awe.
Mm-hmm.
And the rationale behind book number 2 is I'm primarily a motivational speaker these days and a
Yeah.
podcast host myself. We run a podcast called Live Inspired, and I interview people I look up to. And so I share their stories. But on the podium, I'm the one speaking, encouraging audiences to keep moving forward in their life, to achieve
Yeah.
some goal, race towards significance, love one another, build bridges, man. Like, let's come together around these issues that matter in a marketplace that feels isolated. And in every single pre-conference call, they tell me about all the challenges they face and how isolated their workforce feels. They share stats like 1.6 million Americans attempted to take their own life last year. That the majority of the country these days feel that the best days of the U.S. are behind us, not in front of us. That 46% of us feel isolated. We feel as if we are doing life by ourselves. That racism and poverty and all this other isms are hopping up. They're actually increasing. All this is going on. So that's what's happening in corporate America. But then for fun, I speak to kids from time to time. And when I speak at schools, I walk in and these kids are on fire with life. When I ask a question of corporate audiences, no one responds. When I ask a question of kids, every hand goes up. When it comes
Wow.
time for them to ask questions of me afterwards, corporate environments, no one has anything to ask. We hold it close to our vest. With
Yeah.
kids, every hand goes up. And not only do they raise their hands, they wave their hands and they grunt. Let's just say, like,
That's so true.
kids are engaged, man. They have not
Yeah.
seen something in nature that bores them. Because
Yeah.
for them, everything is a new experience. And if you look different than they do, they will ask you about it, but they're not going to judge you long term on it. They will
Right.
ask, they'll understand, and then they'll come together and then they'll move forward with you. That's
Yeah.
not how we adults work. And so my question on the front side of Writing in Oz, what were we as kids? Why did we lose that? And how do we return to it? And for your listeners, Jesus is quoted as saying, "Let the children come to me."
Yeah.
And my perspective is it's not based on age. When Christ says, "Let the children come to me," he's saying, hey, if you are a tax collector and you have an open mind and an open heart, come.
Right.
Come. So he is inviting all of us, but he's insisting that we return to the childlike mindset, the childlike awe that we once had and can have again. And
Yeah.
so in awe allows us to live back into that.
I love that. I was talking to a friend not that long ago, and she had been to a wedding, and she said the Lord just really, really used this little girl to speak to her. She said the dance floor kind of cranked up at the reception, and she said there was this little girl dancing
Yes.
in the middle of the dance floor, just unashamedly, joyfully dancing her little heart out. And she said, I sat there and watched her dance. And I just kept thinking how beautiful it is that the
Amen.
world hasn't taught her otherwise yet,
Here's the deal. The world is about to teach her otherwise.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we can either say, well, that's the life, John. Be realistic, man. Become a more cynical. And yet I think the people who are changing the world for the better, there's a lot of people changing it for the worse, but the people who are changing it for the better are not reasonable. And they don't accept stagnation. They do not accept status quo. They are children. They believe that anything is possible, and then they prove it out through their efforts.
Yeah.
And so, man, let's return to that. Let's join that little girl on the dance floor. What I find at weddings, you have kids on the dance floor. My wife and I were at one 3 weeks ago. Children all over the place. There was one cousin of ours who has special needs. She was on the dance floor. She's about 24, unabashedly having the time of her life. This incredible girl that is teaching everybody else how to live. is on the
Yeah.
dance floor. You have a couple young people on the dance floor who are hammered. They've been drinking too much
Yeah.
and they're on the dance floor. And then you have a couple retirees who realize life is meant to be lived and I'm going to live it
Right.
now. No more apologizing. No more sitting at the back table waiting to
Yeah.
get out of here. I'm going to be
Yeah.
in the middle of it all, kicking up my heels, tearing it up. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
you go to the bar if you want and get some liquid courage. But I would remind you, you don't need to. You don't
Right.
need to. You can feel unashamed again about having life flowing through your veins. Children
Yeah.
have it. Older folks have it. Sometimes people who have some special needs who are showing the rest of us what real gifts look like have it.
Right.
And why don't we return to it? So that's what in awe is, man. It's an invitation to become who you always were and can become again.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay, back to the book cover. I chose number 4, the one that is sort of an off-white and it has the kite kind of going
I
up through
love
the
that
word
one.
awe.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that one. I love how you use different colors to kind of highlight the childlike wonder, inspiration, meaning, joy in your subtitle. I thought that one was fun.
Rebecca, we have been outvoted. You and I are voted off Survivor Island. So unfortunately, it is my second favorite, the one that is blue with the white clouds and a red
Yeah.
kite. By far in our testing, by far, like 75% compared to the other 3 was the one that others nominated. And when asked why, people said, I feel like I'm a kid again.
Yeah.
And if you're actually going down to like, well, what are we trying to convey? There it is. We want people to realize you can be a kid again. You can look at clouds and say, I'm not just going to be bored by it or grab sunglasses so I don't have to see it. I can look up and see images in it again. And I can see possibility in my life and in my marriage and in my singleness again. And so I think what people see in that blue cover with the white clouds and the red kite is what they saw when they were kids.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so awesome. And so I'm seeing that the book comes out in May. So you're almost to the home stretch.
So the book is written. Super excited about that.
Yeah.
And now it's, as you know, from writing your own book, you spend an awful lot of time thinking through how do we talk about the book and how do we promote it and how do we read from it and how do we elevate it? And then how do we touch lives beyond the book?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you always want to be thinking through, once someone's done reading a book, how do you keep loving that person? How do you keep encouraging her or encouraging him or encouraging them? So that's the fun stuff we're thinking through right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are you going to do the audiobook?
Oh, yeah. For me, like, I'm an easy cry. You've heard me pretty animated on this call. So, like, I've already begun kind of practicing this a couple times. And there are scenes within that book that I cannot get through. And so I don't want that to be some polished speaker, yawning as they read through it. I want the energy and the passion for life that I had when I wrote that and experienced that to be also felt by the listeners tuning in.
Yeah.
Looking for non-toxic, high-quality soap made by a company you can trust? Let me introduce you to Indigo Sundries, a Christian, family-owned small business that's been handcrafting soap for over 20 years. Every bar is made the old-fashioned way and free from seed oils, parabens, phthalates, sulfates, and all the other things your skin just doesn't need. Just clean, skin-loving ingredients that actually leave you feeling moisturized and refreshed. Whether you love a good fragrance, prefer essential oils, or need a simple unscented bar, Indigo Sundries has something for everyone, plus liquid soaps, room sprays, and beard products too. Get free shipping on orders over $50, and don't forget to use code Rebecca10 for 10% off at checkout. Treat your skin to the good stuff at indigosundries.com. If you've ever taken your earrings off at the end of the day with that big sigh of relief, you need to hear about Comfy Earrings. Comfy Earrings are flat back, hypoallergenic earrings designed for 24/7 wear. No poking, no irritation, just beautiful, lightweight earrings that stay comfortable whether you're sleeping, traveling, working out, or running from one project to the next. They're perfect for women with sensitive ears, and they come in so many gorgeous, everyday styles. Check them out at comfyearrings.com or through the link in the description. Refresh your jewelry box with earrings you'll never want to take off. Trust me, your ears will thank you. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so exciting.
What about you? Are you going to read your book?
I don't know. So sort of the context at this point, I feel like I can share. This won't come out till January anyway. But so one thing the Lord really used in my life, my mom is a cancer survivor, and she went through breast cancer several years ago. And through that, God just really put a ministry on my heart that has been around for a few years. So we package handmade hats and handwritten letters of encouragement and deliver them into hospitals, mostly in the Southeast right now. And, as you know, you get, you have a thing, you have a ministry, you get the opportunity to share that with other people. And God just, uses those opportunities. And also where kind of the book comes in is all of the conversations that happened and continue to happen after I speak somewhere. So
Right.
you say amen, you walk towards the back of the room, and you
That's
have
right.
all these conversations with people who are, in a similar, fill in the blank season of life where they're facing something and God's using that to bring something greater, that's going to bring him glory out of it. And so that is my heart, is to share just
Yes.
wisdom and what I've learned from my journey with readers is just, what do you do when you feel like God is calling you to, quote, do the thing
Yes.
that is unique to you, that is a way that only you in a unique way can honor and glorify him. And so I've actually been doing some research into just the lives of people in those kinds of moments. I surveyed a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of ministry leaders on exactly what I just said. They were in that moment. So I just spoke and kind of put together a women's conference that was last weekend. And I told myself after that was over that I could start reading through the feedback and just kind of putting pen to paper on kind of where that leads in terms of content. So I'm very early on in the phase of writing, but I'm excited.
So I just want to encourage you to keep listening to that feedback, keep praying and listening to how God wants to use the story, and keep moving forward. Just keep left foot in front of the right and watch what happens.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so pumped. So I pulled a couple of quotes that I love of yours that I'd love to talk about. One of them says, "You can't always choose the path you walk in life, but you can always choose the manner in which you walk it." I love that. So talk to us about what you've learned because, of the fire and of your story about just choosing joy and choosing to celebrate each day that we have.
So what I've learned in my life, I'm sure you have in yours, and for the listeners who are being honest, they and theirs, is that it's not about like what we discovered. It's almost like what is taught to us by an experience, by God, by a friend. And so my mother, probably the greatest teacher I have, taught me so much about life, but maybe the best lesson she taught me, because you've been through the storm, doesn't mean you can stay in the clouds permanently. Like you can't keep pointing back to not having fingers, to having scars, to walking with a limp, as to why you can't move forward in your life, John. You are not going to be a victim to what happened. That's been taken care of. Now you got to step into it. And so I could give you a whole lot of incredible momisms on this one.
Sure.
But maybe the best example is on the day I came home from the hospital. I'm in a wheelchair. I'm 9 years old, 5 months in the hospital. Now we've had the homecoming. We had the party. Everyone's left. Just 5 siblings, mom and dad at the table, and supper in front of me. I can't hold a fork, though, because I don't have fingers.
Right.
And my sister Amy grabs a fork, starts scooping potatoes toward my mouth. And my mother says, "Amy, drop the fork. If John is hungry, he'll feed himself."
Yeah.
And so here's a little boy who has no fingers, no chance at life, looking at his mother in dismay, thinking, how in the world will I ever feed myself? And the long story made very short is by the end of the night, 2.5 hours later, my plate had been flipped twice. There were tears, there was sadness, the homecoming was ruined. But by the very end of the night, Rebecca, there was a little boy with a fork sandwiched between his two hands, moving peas toward his mouth, looking angrily at his mom.
Yeah.
And I've been eating by myself and living on my own and not being victimized by the past ever since. And so you can't always choose the path that you walk in life. That is true for all of us. But you can always choose the manner in which you move forward, in which you walk forward. And I think too frequently, we don't hear the second half of that quote.
That's right.
We hear the first half, the cancer that you've been dealing with, the adversity you dealt with as a kid, the neighbor going through that thing. We've all seen the headlines in the paper,
Right.
But we don't realize, and still, God is going to use this thing, but you got to take the first foot and put it in front of the last.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And so the other quote that I loved of yours was, "Today, choose to view your scars, the ones you wear on the outside and those you guard on the inside, as gifts." What encouragement, would you give to someone facing maybe some newer scars, and they're kind of navigating through that.
Awesome. So I'll answer that in, I think, two ways. The first is, if they are new scars, I would encourage you strongly to give them time to heal appropriately. I met with a dear friend of mine whose son took his life in February. And in early March, he was seated with me in tears in his eyes saying, I'm trying to make sense out of this, and I want to start a not-for-profit. I'm thinking about writing a book. Where would you encourage me to begin?
Yeah.
And I took a long pause, and I'm like, well, brother, let me answer that differently. And so I said, it took me 24 years to begin embracing my story. 24 years. Yeah. You've had 3 weeks to go to the gravesite and try to make sense out of what has been taken from you and the hardship you're weathering. So the very first encouragement I gave my brother Mark is the same I would encourage any of your listeners who are dealing with a fresh wound. Give it time. God's not even begun to begin the healing process with that wound. And then I would encourage you to recognize that the scars exist because the wounds have healed. And so when you see something on your heart or on your skin or on your past that has been healed, there may be a bruise, there may be a bump, there may be a red line or a broken body. But once you're convinced it's healed, then you can begin taking the next step forward, trying to make sense of what it means, not only for you as a servant, but also for how you can use the story to glorify God. Yeah. So I think it's a long, long healing process. I would encourage you and beg you, don't rush it. We in America in particular, first world nations, we love rushing everything. We love getting thin fast and getting rich fast and healing from tragedy fast and recovering from divorce and bankruptcy and losing a son really quickly. And yet that's not, read through scripture. God's still speaking thousands of years after whispering the first word. So I would just encourage your listeners, take your time with this one. Just take your time. Let God slowly saute the story for some mighty purpose.
Yeah. I remember when my mom was recovering from her surgeries, one of her best friends is a nurse. And I remember she was just really struggling with, everything that kind of gets stripped away in a journey like breast cancer, for a woman. She said, Robin, just remember that every time you look at your scars, that it is an indication that healing has occurred.
Amen.
And that was one of the most powerful things to my mom that anybody shared with her throughout her journey was just, every time I look at a scar, I wouldn't have that scar if it didn't mean that healing hadn't occurred. So, but I agree with you. I think we live in such a microwave society. We, even as a believer, we want to use, the difficult things we face to honor and glorify him. They do make us, grow into more of his likeness. And all of that is 100% the case. But a lot of the times we don't want to do the hard work of really, taking that 24 years to really navigate how God wants to use it. And so I think that's really wise advice there.
One thing I would layer onto it is your mother and I both share scars.
Yeah.
And yet I think the deepest scars you can possibly have are the ones that you can't see in a mirror or you can't see in an evening dress.
Yeah.
It's the kind that when your eyes are shut at night, that's when that scar reveals itself. That's when the wound festers. And so for your listeners, because most of us haven't had breast cancer, we haven't had a mastectomy, we haven't been through burns, we haven't been through that stuff. But every single one of us have scars, all of us. And just as a compassionate voice, I think the most painful ones to recover from are the ones on the inside. And so I just want those of us who are dealing with that stuff to realize you're not alone. And that is a mighty wound. And God will use not only cancer and burns, but also abuse and neglect and bankruptcy and divorce and every other thing that you've dealt with quietly to draw you closer and eventually to glorify him.
Yeah, that's so good. So I was looking at your Instagram this morning, and I saw that you just recently spoke on the Dave Ramsey stage at his SMART conference. So that's super exciting. Could you talk a little bit about just kind of the progression of your speaking career? I think it's easy, on this side and audiences you speak to now to kind of overlook what all the hard work that, it required to get you to this point. Take us from, Girl Scout troop to Dave Ramsey and kind of challenges you faced and all of that kind of as your speaking career has grown.
So I would encourage listeners who really want to learn this to go and check out the book On Fire. I write about it a little bit in chapter 2.
Oh, cool.
But I'll give you a succinct version right now. The Girl Scouts, which did not even pay with a box of Samoas, led to a Rotary group, which did not even pay with a chicken lunch, which led to one Kiwanis group. So in year 1 of killing it, I gave 3 speeches for $0. It cost me money in the second year, but it wasn't about ROI. In the second year, I gave 8 speeches. I don't think I got paid anything. In the third year, I gave about 30 and maybe made a couple gas cards, one Target card, and one Amazon card. So now we're really crushing it.
Yes.
I had a conversation at that point with an old friend of mine. Her name is Deanna, and she had heard somewhere that I was doing some speaking and offered to assist me. And to bring her on would require $50,000, which is way more money than I made in the previous year. And my wife and I prayed over this. We realized, I don't know if we can get it done. I got a card from Deanna in the mail that said, John, this is a quote directly from Abraham Lincoln. John, let us determine that the thing can and shall be done. Together, we will find a way. Yeah. And I read this to my wife at the dinner table. We got 2 little kids at the time, and it just resonated. We took out a mortgage on the house. I'm not encouraging everybody to do this, but this is what we did. I hired Deanna. We were top line positive in year 1. We've been growing every single year since, both in top line revenue, bottom line profitability, giving back to the community, being way more generous in charitable giving, giving away books and speeches and prayers and everything else you can imagine. Because we were never creating this business for our own purposes. Right. It was never, how do we use that to retire early?
Sure.
That might be a benefit we get. But I think we came into this with the why being, how do we use the story to glorify God? How do we remind people in a community that is so negative, 94% of headlines last year were negative, that God's not done, that the sun is still shining and the best is ahead of us. How do we do this? Yeah. And so we've been pursuing this actively since, and I think it is being blessed in every way imaginable. A street fight some days, it does not get easier in time, but I don't think it's supposed to be easy. I think that's another lie, that being a Christian is going to make your faith easy. It's going to make your marriage easy. It's going to make all the pain go away. It will ensure that your mother never gets cancer. None of that's true. All it does ensure is that when you go through these things, you're not going through it on your own or for your own benefit. It's for something bigger than us. And that's what faith reminds us. And so I know I'm summing up your question in a long form answer, but one by one speech at a time, it led to another. And it's been leading to another slowly over 13 years, eventually last weekend leading to Dave Ramsey, 11,000 people in Sacramento. Yeah. And we're just getting going because God's just getting going.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the first time I ever heard you speak, I meant to say this earlier in the show, I went to the SHRM conference last time I was in DC. Yeah, I was in an HR role at that time. And I remember I was there with one of my coworkers, and this is so funny. Now that I'm thinking back on it, I remember I had picked out, all my sessions before you go, and, you research all the speakers and all that. And I was actually originally not signed up for, or hadn't slotted, your breakout session in my schedule. But I read, I guess, maybe like your bio in the conference booklet. And for whatever reason, whatever I was signed up for was some super boring HR, like policy driven kind of session. And I remember looking at my coworker and I was like, man, I just really want to listen to this motivational dude. Can we please go listen to his session instead? And so it was such a last minute thing. And we walked out of your session and I looked at her and I was like, well, that was the best session of this entire conference. I got more out of that than I did. And that's not dissing SHRM at all. It was a great conference, but I'd never heard you speak, and it was just such an encouragement. So anyway, that was my first. Yes.
Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for choosing that content. I'm grateful for SHRM for the chance. Yeah. And on that day, it was actually Father's Day. It was June of maybe 2017. Father's Day is meant to be at home with your kids and church and everything else. Yeah. But on that day, I traveled with one little boy. His name is Patrick. He's my second born. It was one of the most remarkable trips that brought a father and a son together in ways that still have changed our relationship for the better. And so for me, fun. It's just like, if you can keep saying yes to his will, not yours, keep saying yes to his will, not yours, watch what happens. And as a father, this has played out, as a husband, it's played out, as a son, as a leader, and as a speaker. If you can just keep saying yes to the next step, as long as it's not your will, it's going to lead to things you can't fathom yet, but it will reveal itself in time.
Yeah, that's so awesome. What do you think has been the most rewarding part of all of this and all of the ways that God's used your story. Maybe it's a story that somebody shared with you, like we were saying backstage after you spoke, or anything like that. If there were one or two things that you feel have been the most encouraging or rewarding to you, what would they be?
So I'll answer in a way that I don't care as much about, and we'll get back to your real question.
Yeah.
To think that a boy who's an introvert did not want to get burned, wanted to play baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals, and doesn't like speaking in public. Like every strike you can have against you, we have.
Yeah.
Has gone on to travel the world as a speaker, as an author, as a podcast host, to be in front of 10,000 folks at the Ramsey event, among hundreds of other events, like all of this. To think that, I think they said digitally more than 50 billion people have been impacted by the story now. To me,
Wow.
it's just shocking. Like, I can't believe God's that big. And I can't believe I don't pay enough attention to how he uses the story. Because I think I'm playing small, and I think we all play a little too small. The God of the universe can use us in ways we're not dreaming big enough quite yet, so keep dreaming bigger. But more to the real heart of your question, for me, it's about individual impact, always. So I'm not as turned on by 20 million or whatever the numbers are, one by one by one. It's how Jesus taught. Yes, the Beatitudes were given in a large park with 5,000 folks, but like usually it's one by one. It's meeting one woman at a well. And saying that is true. It's meeting people where they are. And so my favorite story, and this is hard, it's like having you pick a favorite child, but maybe my favorite story is that a guy at a conference bought our book one time. It's shipped to his home, and he picked it up, threw it in the back of his car, got a call that day that his daughter, 17 years old, had attempted to take her life. While he's waiting to see her for the first time, he reads, I get emotional thinking about this. He reads the story of how John O'Leary's dad greeted him. And so he had one way that he was going to approach his daughter. And then he read chapter 1 in the waiting room of his dying daughter. All right. And he walks in, and instead of like freaking out or saying, what were you thinking? He greets her with pure love. Accountability will come, right? I mean, the prodigal son is not like a story of grand forgiveness. I still think there's a second chapter of accountability, but it begins with forgiveness. It begins with welcoming back into the family. And we'll deal with the mistakes later on, but today is about celebrating. Well, in that moment, he greeted her with love. He read the book. He eventually gives it to her. This daughter gets through 3 chapters. They then take her from a hospital into a place where she's going to get better. But she can't have sharp objects, so she can't have a hardcover book. So she and her dad rip out every single page of On Fire, and they duct tape it together in their own version. She has read through that book now, and I have a picture of it 7 different times, reading On Fire. And now she says, Dad, when I made this decision, I wanted to die. Now I'm making a decision to choose life. And so she credits the story of On Fire because I wanted to die too. You know, it's a story we don't have time for today, but I wanted to die. I don't want to live through this. And through grace and faith and love and accountability and people coming back into my life again and again and again, a little boy no longer wants death. He wants life. And now I'm a champion for it. And she read about this, and now she's a champion for it. I think that's awesome. And you think about where her story can go, how she can speak to a much younger community than I can about loss and pain and that feeling of isolationism, and how they are not alone, and how God is using them and loving them. And there's reason for life in theirs.
Yeah. Man, that's so awesome. All right, last question. One of my favorites. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Well, there's a lot there, but we'll come back on your podcast to answer it. But I think in short order, Jack Buck, and you heard his story when you were at SHRM in DC, but Jack Buck's the announcer for the St. Louis Cardinals, profoundly changed my life, profoundly. Every night of his life, he asked one question, and the question was, what more can I do? And for a long time, I just thought, wow, that's cool. He did that because he asked that question. He visited me once, and then a second time, and then a third time, and then for 5 months, and then started giving me baseballs, and like this crazy cascading story of leadership and love that I received by his question. But I think the real power of the question is not in what Jack Buck gave John O'Leary. The real power is what if Rebecca asked it tonight? What might that do in your marriage? What might that do in your singleness? What might that do with addictions or dreams or writing a book? What might that do in your faith walk? What might that do in your journey going forward? If every single night of your life you were committed not only to brushing your teeth and going potty, but asking the question, what more can I do? Answer the question, go to bed exhausted, we all do, wake up recommitted, refocused, revitalized, look at the answer, and then do it, whatever it is. For you, Rebecca, it might be writing that book. It might be visiting a mom, even though you're too busy to see your mom today. It might be writing a love letter to someone that you need to forgive.
Yeah.
It might be a whole lot of things, but imagine every single night doing one thing that you weren't going to do otherwise. I've been doing that for 7 years of my life. It has led to 2 books now. It has led to a charitable outreach. It has led to me working harder, but also me taking more time off. One time it led to me writing my wife, this is just between the two of us, a love letter every single day for 365 days, and then wrapping it up and giving it to her as a gift.
Wow.
She had no idea I was doing that, but I realized my marriage is going stagnant. And this is on me, not her. And so I wanted to recommit to her by finding one cool thing she was doing every day for us, for our kids, for our community, moments where she just shined.
Yeah.
And so where did I come up with that great idea to write her a love letter? Well, what more can I do? And so if you ask me, John, what's the best piece of advice I can give your listeners? Today, why wait? Go grab a 92-cent journal or a cocktail napkin, and on the back of it, write the question, what more can I do? Answer it. And if it worked tomorrow, do it again. Watch and repeat, and watch what happens in your life.
I love that. Love that. Okay. Tell our listeners how they can keep in touch with you and all that you're doing.
So I think more people, probably my energy shows up best on the podcast.
Yes.
So the same, like this obnoxious optimism for life, that is not feigned. It's who I am. It's who God made me.
Yeah.
It comes across in the way I share my heart and in the way I encourage others to share theirs. So we've interviewed people like Brene Brown, Dave Ramsey, astronauts, survivors, overcomers, people who have faith that are different than the one that you and I, Rebecca, have. Yeah. I think if you are convicted enough in your belief, then you ought to be open enough to meeting people at the well with where they are. Sure. And so I bring on people that don't look, act, talk, worship like me so that I can learn from them and ultimately reveal to others where God is working in our lives. And so I love our Live Inspired podcast. It's called Live Inspired with John O'Leary. That's a cool place to check it out. We've got books called On Fire. It's a cool book. Another book coming out later this year called In Awe. You ought to check it out. Get an early copy now. You can get some cool gifts with it. And then our primary website is called johnolearyinspires.com. So It is a story about how every day I meet someone in the marketplace, we share their story, and we broadcast it to a community, reminding us that the news does a phenomenal job telling us how bad the world is. But our eyes, our heart, our faith remind us that God's not done, that he uses people for a cause greater than we can imagine.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, I am so excited for our listeners to hear your story and just connect with you, get all of the books, and we will have to talk again on the other side of In Awe releasing and being out in the world so that you can tell us all about that experience. But I'm just so thankful for your time and just your story, John. Thanks so much.
Rebecca, I'm thankful for your heart, for your faith. I know your marriage. I know the story of your mother just through what I've been picking up online following you. You are a light into a marketplace that is desperate for light, and salt to a world that is desperate for salt. So I just want to thank you for your mission and for your megaphone. It's making a difference.
Same here. All right, friend. Well, we will talk soon. Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks.